Thank you. Good evening. My name's Victoria Beale. I'm your host for NTV Unscripted. It's lovely to be back and see you all. I hope you've been well. I'm here today with my guest, the wonderful Julie Wilkinson. She is an amazing serial entrepreneur and a mergers and acquisition specialist. Julie, thank you for coming today and being my guest. How are you?
I'm really good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
It's an absolute honour and privilege to have you here. So Julie, you've got an amazing story and I can't wait to share that with the people at home. Tell us first of all about your sort of beginnings. Where was young Julie born and family life and so on?
So I was born in Peterborough in Cambridgeshire. I've lived there all my life. I did take a year out. I went to Australia for a year, but that's where I resided most of my life. Grew up with, I've got a sister, obviously my dad and my mum and my family, most of my family lives around. I suppose I would have what you'd call quite a standard childhood really. You know, lived in a nice home, went to school. I wouldn't say I did particularly that well in school, but I was okay in school. I had quite a turning point in my life because when I was 14 my mum died.
Right.
So obviously that was a big turning point for us and for me especially because I was very close to my mum and I don't think I was that outgoing at that point. I used to stay at home quite a lot and be with her, so I think that was a big turning point for me and my mind changed a lot and I did I think I really sort of turned. I don't think I intentionally did it, but I think it like unintentionally happened a little bit, like my lifestyle changed and my mindset changed a little bit from it.
Right. How did that affect you at school and your education and so forth?
Well, I was going into my GCSE year, so it wasn't ideal. I did okay in school still, but I wouldn't say I exceeded, probably for obvious reasons. But it didn't really hinder me because I was really good at English and my teachers wanted me to do English A-levels and other A-levels, but I just wasn't really ready to do that. So what I actually did was I went and did an MVQ in business studies, so I got a bit of work experience and then I worked part-time at McDonald's as well, right. Just to save some money, and I did that. And then after I finished it was only about 6 months after I finished that I actually went travelling then, because I went travelling when I was 18 for a year.
Mm-hmm. So do you feel like the loss of your mother made you fearless in some respects, kind of let's just throw caution to the wind, or were you a bit more cautious?
Probably a little bit. I don't think it intentionally happened, but I think, you know, I suppose I was from quite what you'd call a traditional home, so my mum didn't really work and my dad sort of did, and my mum sort of built her whole life around us as the kids, and you know I didn't really ever see her have much of a friendship circle and things like that, and I think it kind of, and then obviously like she died young because she was only 40. Wow. And that resonates quite a lot because obviously I'm 40 this year. Yes. So you know she was young when she died, and I suppose obviously she loved looking after the children, so she didn't really have much of a life of her own. I think that resonated with me a lot, to sort of go out and just live my life really, because you don't expect that sort of thing to happen when you're young. It happens to other people, not to you really. Yeah. So I don't think it intentionally happened, but I think probably unconsciously it happened. Do you
think that made you quite a strong person, the person you are today?
Definitely.
How did that impact on the person you are now?
Well, I'm quite resilient. If I say I'm going to do something, I do it. I don't know if it came just from that, but I think it must have had an impact in it. I mean, I've never really reflected or gone and spoken to anyone about it, so I don't quite know, but I think it must have had an impact in it. And I suppose it drives me because my mum didn't work, so she didn't have like her own income stream, and that's been one of the things I've definitely strived towards, is sort of, you know, knowing I can cope on my own. So I got a house quite young, so I had my own house because I got some inheritance money, so I got on the property ladder when I was about when I got back from travelling, so I was about 21, 22, so I owned my own home from quite a young age as well, so that was really good.
Fantastic. So fast forward a little bit, so you went travelling and I think you did some teaching as well. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so I went to Australia for a gap year for 11 months, and I went to Canada for a month as well on the way home. I was a teaching assistant, so I worked in a private school in a place called Rockhampton, which is in Queensland. And I was a teaching assistant, so I was a teaching assistant in the day for the primary school kids, and I did help people that were struggling with maths and English. I used to take them privately and help tutor them. We used to do like school, they had a private island, so I don't know if you've ever heard of Great Keppel Island. That actually was in Australia when, what was the show? when the winners of this show, they used to go to Great Keppel. They actually owned one of the other islands, so we used to go on some school trips and things.
Fantastic.
And then in the evening, I was a boarding mistress, so it was a boarding school.
Right.
So we used to have so a couple of nights a week, you have to do like ground duties, and they had we had a Olympic-sized swimming pool, so we used to do like pool duty and things like that. So it was brilliant, yeah.
Fantastic. So then you went on, obviously, further education. Did you actually go to university?
No.
Julie? No.
No, I didn't go to university.
That's an amazing thing to say, because we'll come back to Julie's story later. This woman has built a very amazing, successful business in 3 years, 3.5 years?
Yeah, 3.5, yeah.
Which we'll come back to after the second commercial break. But Julie, just tell us about your, where you kind of went to, into your career. What were you doing kind of after you left the teaching and the travelling and so forth?
Yeah, so I came back and I lived with my sister, and I started back in sort of purchase ledger roles. And yeah, I was working, I got made redundant, so we had an option to stay or leave, and I chose to leave. And then I went and tried, I was like an underwriter for a little bit, just like a trainee underwriter, and I was there for a few months, but then I got made redundant again.
Right.
So at that point I had two options. I had an option I got offered a position where I could have been like a trainee mortgage underwriter, or I got offered a job at British Sugar.
Okay.
And so I suppose at the time the trainee mortgage underwriter seemed probably like it had a few more prospects long term than sort of the purchase ledger role, but the problem was I couldn't really afford to take the salary drop because it was like a trainee. It was quite back then, I mean it's not quite the same now, but back then it was quite really low salary. Right. And I had my house at that time, so I couldn't afford it. So I took the purchase ledger role. So I was in that role for a couple of years, and I suppose in the end I just started to think, if I lose my job here, because obviously I've been made redundant twice before, so it seemed like it could happen, I thought, I get paid quite well here, would I get paid that well again? I thought, I've got to do something here, I've got to like change my lifestyle a little bit. So I went and asked, and I said, can I study? And they said yes, so they supported me through my study. So I did, so I studied through work. So I started AAT, and I did that evenings, so we didn't go to college like full time, we did it evening and weekends, so we did evenings. So I think AAT was about 3.5 years. And then I went on to study SEMA, so that was weekend college. And actually so British used to have a graduate scheme, and all the people that used to do ACCA, SEMA, so the chartered, all sort of came from from university. I think I was only at that time one of 2 people ever that actually chartered, not going through the graduate scheme through the university.
Yeah.
And I think they did actually review their process at that point to see whether could more people study on the job.
Yeah. And what was it about numbers and kind of this kind of thing that interested you?
I don't know really. I didn't even think. I mean, I was about 25 when I started AAT, so I suppose I was a bit of a late studier as well, because not straight from school. When I first started, I didn't even think I was going to get past the first year, if I'm honest. I didn't really know, because I hadn't studied for so long. But I just sort of excelled in it. And although, yeah, it is numbers, it's quite, especially seen as more strategic, like strategic finance. That was something that I took to. Like, I was really good at like the top SEMA papers, because that was really strategic. And I just really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the journey. So I got a lot of promotions at work, and I moved companies a couple of times and got some promotions and things like that. So yeah, I just really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed this feeling of success as well, I think.
And you're still quite young really to be at the top of your game in that sector, because it's quite a hard area to be in, isn't it, if you're not graduate?
Yeah, so I chartered, in the end, I chartered at 30, so I've been chartered now over about 10 years, yeah, so I chartered just when I was 30, yeah.
So then you went into employed until what age?
37, about 36, 37.
And what was the last role that you had?
So I was just senior finance in it was a retail company, a group company. I think group was about 250 million. I actually had a lot of project roles within that company, so I did have some jobs, but I did a lot of projects. I did a lot of cost out projects. Obviously I know we'll talk about Walker's, my company in a bit, but one of the reasons I started the company was because some of the project roles got me in touch with some SME companies, because I did some project work. They had done some acquisitions, and I worked for some of the smaller companies, and it made me realise, these are quite poorly run, I suppose, to put it nicely. And so that gave me an insight into lots of different areas, because I did lots of different projects, ran big system implementations over sort of 500 people across, like in different countries. I used to oversee the US entity and the Chinese entity as well, so I did a lot of like imports and exports and things like that.
Fantastic. It's still a massive achievement for someone that's so young. And tell us about the personal life, because I think you met your partner husband now during those times. Tell us about him. You can say hello to him as well if you want to.
Hi Mark. I think you should be watching. So we've been together 11 years. So actually I met him when I was studying SEMA, and it was quite a funny story.
Here he is on the screen now.
Oh yeah, he is. Yeah, that's us. That's at the Isle of Wight, because we do a lot of boating.
Yeah.
I met him. It was quite a funny story actually, because I met him as I was leading up to one of my exams. So it wasn't my top SEMA exams, I think it was the ones before. And I remember we were chatting because we actually met online dating.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, online.
Don't knock it.
And and I was messaging him, and we were talking for quite a while. And I remember saying, "Oh, I can't because I'm studying." But then we met up the weekend before the exam, and then I was like, "Right, I can't see you for a few days because my exam was on the Wednesday."
Yeah. Discipline, you see.
Yeah, discipline. Although when I got to my top SEMAs, I never failed any exams actually. I passed first time on every single exam, apart from when I got to my when we had to do 3, and I always blame Mark because I said like he took my attention away. It's always his fault. Yeah. So yeah.
But here you are, Julie, on a TV show. So
yeah, I know, it's cool.
Fantastic. And tell us, you've got a couple of lovely dogs as well. I don't know, the producer has been dying to show you these photographs at home.
Yes.
So tell us about your lovely doggies. There they are.
Oh yeah.
There they are.
Well, unfortunately the white one's passed now.
Oh, yeah.
And we had a white Alsatian Dudley, and Teddy, the black one's an Akita cross Alsatian.
Right.
He's still alive. And then we've got a new puppy now called Jessie. She's 6 months old. She's actually an Aussie Doodle, so she's a cross between an Australian Shepherd and a Standard Poodle.
Fantastic. And tell us about, you've got this dog whisperer diploma, I call it, but it's not called that at all.
No.
What is it, Julie? Please tell everyone.
So I did an animal psychology diploma. I did that way back when we first got, because I'd never had any dogs, and obviously Dudley and Teddy are big dogs. My husband's dad had a Rottweiler Alsatian, so he had grown up with dogs. I actually got attacked by a dog when I was young, so I wasn't really, I wouldn't say I was didn't like dogs. I wasn't really fearful of them, but I'd just never been brought up in that environment. So at first I was a bit like, I don't even want a dog. I was like, it'll be your dog. So again, this is quite a funny story. So we did research a lot about the breeds, because obviously some bigger breeds need more walking than others. So we sort of fell in love with Dudley, so we brought Dudley home, and I said to my husband, it'll be your dog. And he went, and then literally a couple of days after we got him, he was like, oh, I'm going away for 4 days, and he sort of left me with this dog. So I was like, what am I going to do with this dog for 4 days? Anyway, he came home from that, and me and Dudley were just inseparable after that. He was like, that's meant to be my dog. And I was like, no, it's my dog now. Anyway, then things were happening with Dudley, so I mean, because obviously Mark hadn't really had his own dog, he'd been as a family pet, and this dog just wasn't listening, and we'll go and sit, and I was just like, he doesn't know what we're saying, because we were just trying to tell it to sit. So we got this dog trainer, and she showed us click training, and well, she did more in about 30 seconds than we'd done in about 12 weeks. So I just really took to it, and then I started training them, and then I was just interested, so I did this animal psychology training just to sort of learn behaviours and things like that, because obviously they were big, so they had to be well trained.
Fantastic.
And and to be honest, they've been really good. Yeah, really good.
And you've got other outdoor interests as well. You do a lot of outdoorsy stuff. Can you run through all that for us?
Yeah, so we've got a 6.5 metre rib, which is when we go to the Isle of Wight. That's on the water. That's where we go. We've had a couple of jet skis, so we've kind of always been into motorboating, but we've recently just sold the jet ski. We've just bought a Laura Decker sort of small sailing boat, catamaran. So we're just kind of getting into that at the minute. So next year we've booked a holiday to go. We've hired out chartering a 40-foot sailing boat. That will get us I think it gets our competent crew, like an RYA 1-day competent crew licence or something from that holiday.
Fantastic.
So yeah, we're trying to train ourselves, so eventually we want to get maybe our own bigger catamaran, so one day.
Fantastic. Well, we'll come to your story about the business after the commercial break, but tell us about your interest in health and wellness and mindfulness, because that's only been quite a recent shift, hasn't it?
Yeah, so I started this year. So my sister sort of transferred from accounting. She's trained to do belief coding, and she's been quite into wellness for a couple of years, and I was a little bit closed, but I think it started for me because I went to Jamaica in January, like this really nice holiday, and the business ran when I was because I had nearly a month off, and I came back and I thought, I actually still felt a little bit bored on the holiday. Like, I had a good time on the holiday, but it made me realise actually it doesn't really matter where you go. Money doesn't really fulfil you.
No.
And so I joined a wellness centre. So I've got a wellness centre local to us, which I went on, which I go to now. So I do yoga 3 times a week. And I just started to read a lot and watch a lot of podcasts on sort of meditation and manifestation.
Right.
So yeah, I do it a lot now. I probably meditate, well, I think I do it just naturally when things get tough, but I meditate at least 3 times a day.
Right.
I do a lot of like manifestation and mindfulness, sort of breathing exercises and journaling and gratitude journals and things like that. So,
and can you share with us some of the manifestation techniques for the audience at home?
Yeah, so I'm not a doctor, so I don't. Yeah, but
disclaimer, we've just written it.
Yes, but. So what I believe, what it does for me is meditation brings me back to the present.
Yeah.
So what I do know is 95% of our actions are gone from our unconscious mind, and they're traumas and things that have happened in the past that is telling us stories that basically aren't true.
Right.
So I find that meditation brings me back to now. So when my mind goes, because I think it does in everyone's mind, think the worst case scenario, when it goes ridiculous and you start.
Now, I think things are hard for people, absolutely.
And so the meditation sort of brings you back to the present. So it's just sort of breathing exercises. So like put your feet on the floor and just feel the floor.
Right.
And breathe deep breaths.
Bare feet?
Yeah,
generally?
bare feet. Yeah, bare feet generally. Yeah. So and if you run out of time, I mean, I do it in the shower sometimes just to like utilise time effectively.
Yeah.
Whereas manifestation is more about living, like realising your dreams. So the brain doesn't know reality from fiction. So if you tell yourself you're going to be you're a millionaire, if you just kept telling yourself you were a millionaire, the brain doesn't actually know you're not. The body might know, but the brain doesn't. This is what I'm led to believe. And so that's why you have the manifesting techniques, is to sort of, well, in a way you could argue you're lying to yourself, but you're not. You just truly believe something's going to happen, and it's not like it just falls from the sky and happens. You still have to take action, but what it's meant to do is you make more conscious decisions. Because you're meditating, your mind's clearer, you think more clearly, so you make better decisions.
Right. Can you talk us through like the techniques that you would use for the manifestation? Yeah,
so close your eyes for 12 minutes 3 times a day and basically just visualize what you want. So what does it look like? So I'm doing professional speaking, so if I'm visualizing what professional speaking is, it's here, on TV, on stage, but like who are the inspirational people that do that what do they look like, how do they behave? So one thing I have like a morning routine. So now when I get up in the morning, for the first 15 minutes I don't do anything for the first hour on like socials or emails.
Right.
I just get up and I think to myself, right, who do I want to be today? Like, how do I want to show up? What do I want my life to be? Like telling myself like what I want, like what am I going to achieve.
And do you say it? Do you think it? Do you write it?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
I say it and think it a lot. Sometimes I journal it, and because that just puts you in a place that you're taking control of what you want. And then I meditate. So then I think for me the meditation and manifestation comes together. Whether you are meant to do it separately, I don't, because like I say, I've only been doing it for 6 months. So and I have my own sort of well-being coach, because I think everyone should invest in themselves.
I've just been told by my producer we're nearly coming to our first commercial break. Can you believe it?
I know, it's so quick. Yeah.
Just to leave everyone on that happy note, what has this shift and transformation done for you personally? Just share that with us.
Oh, it's like changed my life. Yeah, like my outlook on life, the way I behave, I can definitely see it. And I think I do hence I'm here with you, because it's all happened.
It's happening.
In the last, for me it's been a bit of a journey, but I've taken a lot of big actions, especially over the last few months, not like worrying so much. And even when I think, this might happen, actually realising, but it's not happening today.
Fantastic. Well, look, Julie, thank you so much. You've been amazing first section. Please do come back and join us and hear the rest of Julie's wonderful story. Welcome back to NTV Unscripted. I'm here today with the wonderful Julie Wilkinson, who is founder of Wilkinson Accounting Solutions. Now, just before the commercial break, we were talking about manifestation and meditation and the importance of doing all those things as a human being, but also as an entrepreneur. Julie, let's pick up from there and we'll just talk about how that kind of has affected your entrepreneurial life. If you could just elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, so I think for me personally, it's just helped me become clearer. And so like I say, I meditate all the time. I think I do it like naturally now, just throughout the day. So when you have hard times, because we all do as business owners and in life in general really, I just go and breathe, even if I just take 5 seconds just to breathe. And it definitely and you know, I've made some more well, I say rash, but more sort of decisions that are sort of changing my life, because I think, you know, we all go to the point where we have a bit of fear. Oh, can I do this or can I do that? And the fear holds us back from where we want to get to. And I find that when I meditate and manifest, I sort of see visions more, and I'm just like, actually I believe in myself, so I know I can do this, and then I take the action from that belief.
Right, that's important, that chain of events there, and make sure you take notice of this at home, ladies and gentlemen. But now we're going to talk about you actually working, being a 37-year-old, you had a job, a really good job, we spoke about that earlier, and then you just decided, I'm going to set up my own company. I mean, that's quite a mad thing to do. Not everyone does it. So what enabled that? What made that decision happen?
Yeah, so well, my husband had been saying to me for ages, he thought I'd be good at starting a business, and I don't think it was really the accounting that stopped me doing that. I think it was more at first, it seems a bit like mega going out, like there's a lot to do. So I actually started a sideline business initially. It was a CV writing business. That's what I started with, and that really took off. I did about 100 in a year. I did a lot of like director CVs and things like that. I did a lot of interview techniques, and I did about 100 in a year. I had a 95% success rate of getting people to interview.
Fantastic.
So I realised actually maybe I was a bit more entrepreneurial than I thought, and yeah, so I then decided to go out. I always knew, I did quite a bit of research when I started the business. That's one of the things I did. So I asked, so when I was saying earlier about when I was working for this SME business within the corporate company, I went and asked 20 businesses what their accountants did for them, and 100% saw their accounts once a year. Right. So I found it quite strange, because I'd never worked in practice. So practice is like in an accounting firm and working for lots of companies. I'd always worked in corporate, so for like one big company. So I'd had 20 years at that point nearly in supply chain, commercial finance. I think I pretty much worked in every job you can work in a finance department within a corporate company. And then I went and spoke to accounting firms, and I asked them, well, what do you offer? And I was told nobody values management accounts. They don't want it. It's hard to sell it. So a lot of people tried and then just went back to doing sort of tax returns and bookkeeping. When I sort of delved into like what people saw as management accounts, I could see it wasn't really what I believed was management accounts, because I came from this, you know, commercial environment, what reporting management information was. So what I realised was I think I had a skill set. I didn't necessarily know at the time how I was going to use the skill set, but I knew I had a skill set. That's what I knew, and so I knew that I could offer like businesses a lot. I just had to then find out who I wanted to work with, because like everybody is, you know, you can't, although maybe theoretically you can help everyone, you know, you can't help everyone. Not everyone's going to be for you.
That's right.
And that's the journey that I had to go on. I mean, it didn't help. So I actually decided in 2019.
Right.
And I ended up working in my job because I had to hand my notice in, but then I did a bit of contracting, so a lot of FD contracting for some companies. So I actually made the decision, it was Jan 20 when I actually had stopped everything, so that was one of the things I made a decision, is I could have carried on contracting because it was good money, but I knew I wasn't really building a business then, or I didn't feel I was just sort of swapping time for money, and I thought that isn't really what I wanted, so that was why I made the decision to stop. And then obviously Jan 20, and we all know what happened, it happened in 2020. I'm not going to say the dreaded C word, but we all know what happened.
Well, I mean, how funny. You were literally, well, it wasn't funny at the time, but you literally left a job, you set up a company, and then that happened. So how did you take this idea of a company and then grow it to just short of 500,000, which it is now? It was amazing.
So I had a business plan, because obviously that's what we help people. So I'm very financially savvy. So I had a good forecast, cash flow, and I kind of just stuck to my guns. So I invested a lot of money. So the first year I think I invested probably about £15,000. And what I did was, because I had no social media presence at all in Jan 20, I was like, this is a bit of a worry, because I had like not really any customers, no social media presence, and I had to just get out and do it. So that I did a bit of networking, invested this money in sort of LinkedIn training, sales training and personal development to sort of learn, because I knew that I wanted to do sort of more advisory services, but it was, you know, how do you sell those services to people? So I did get some CFO work, but so the first thing I did was, although I did kind of do contracting, but I changed it. So rather than doing 5 days, I actually did more project-based pricing, because I think the best way you make money is not to swap your time for money, is to sort of more do project-based. So that was how I first swapped it, was to make some money, but not work every day of the week.
Yes.
And then I had to just be, and I outsourced it a lot from the beginning. So I brought IT firms and outsourced bookkeeping things on right from the beginning, even though technically I could have done it at that time. I just knew that I didn't want to be wasting my time doing those things. So I invested, so I suppose I took a lot of risk, because I invested a lot of money and I spent a lot of money, even though maybe I wasn't always earning a lot of money. But then that just opened doors to me. So I did some FD works, and how I got into acquisitions. So obviously we specialise in mergers and acquisitions now, so we help people buy and sell businesses. That's one of our key areas. How I got into that initially was I'd done some CFO work for a company, and anyway, long and short of it was, at the end of the contract, the broker came to me and said they were so impressed with what I'd done, would I help them? So I went and sort of contracted, because back then it was just me, obviously, in 2020. So I went and did some consulting into some acquisition work for 5 or 6 companies, deals, and I thought, oh, I can do this. I didn't have the infrastructure at first, so that's what I had to build, like my own infrastructure to be able to do it. So that's what I did. I just built the services and the packs, and went out and got the CFOs.
How did you do that, to build the infrastructure? Summarise that.
I sort of packaged up the services that I thought people needed. Obviously we have developed it over time, because I didn't know. I reached out to networks. I also spent 18 months building a LinkedIn presence, so that was another thing that I did, was I didn't go off. So it took me a long time, probably at least 18 months, to build a proper to get good traction.
An audience, basically.
Yeah, and I think people can get, oh, if the algorithm's not working, they can't be bothered to show up. I think you do just have to persist and not change necessarily, because I could have at any time just gone, do you know what, I'm just going to go and do tax and bookkeeping.
How often did you post on LinkedIn, for example?
Well, I posted every day. Every day. Now I post 2 to 3 times every single day still. I just schedule mine to like once a week to post them. But and I just had to keep going, and they did flop, at some times, and sometimes it was good. But now I'm seen as quite, I get a lot of positive feedback. I get a lot of traction from LinkedIn, especially like direct message and things in the acquisition industry specifically. And obviously now I've launched my podcast this year as well.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Yes, I decided to launch, so now we're on all social, so we're on Insta, TikTok, we have SEO, LinkedIn, and I decided to go on the podcast just because, well, I just like this sort of thing, really. I like podcasts. So I initially just guested on them, and then decided to launch my own. It's called the Build and Exit, and it is specifically around sort of acquisitions and exit planning. And I did it because I just saw there was such a lack of financial acumen in business in general. So we see, because of the consultancy work we do, we see a lot. So we probably see about 100 balance sheets a month, I'd say, within the company, and 98% of them never reconcile. And most business owners don't really understand. That's why brokers get a bad name, because the people are expecting the brokers to do like the adjusted EBITDAs for the valuations, and they don't know how, because it's 10 years of bad accounting that's causing the problems, not really, and the understanding of the business in general. So I just thought, people need more guidance and support, and that was the reason I started the podcast.
So in an ideal world, if you could wave a magic wand, okay, there's young people watching this show today and they think, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be like Julie. What advice could you give them?
I think definitely to have a business plan and a financial plan.
How important is that? Just to express the importance of that part.
I think it's 100% important, because I think a lot of people get where they are from luck, because some work, some doesn't work. We saw in COVID with the bounce back loans, people are trading off other people's money because they're not managing their cash flows, because they're using their VAT and their tax money without planning it. And then when something happens, so obviously COVID was a big problem, but even if you're trying to change something in a business, so maybe you want to expand or do something differently, you come up against challenges then, because you don't have the right information to make decisions. So I really believe everyone should be planning. I don't think you should have a business really without some form of plan.
And that's the beauty about your company, is that you help with all of those things. It's very few accountants who will just do, they'll just do the accounts, they won't do the full commercial growth and and planning, and then eventual acquisition side. So tell us about the mergers and acquisitions, because that is your specialist area. For people watching, explain in layman's terms what that means and how you are actually on the sort of curve of that.
Yeah, so mergers and acquisitions is basically, in simple terms, you buy businesses. So you're buying a business or somebody else. Either you're buying the assets or you're buying the shares of the company. So we help on either side. I mean, we predominantly probably do more of our work on the buy side. But that's what the podcast is trying to do, because the sell side need to probably get more. I think they need to, sellers don't tend to plan in advance. I think the UK is probably one of the countries that's the furthest behind on planning for exit.
Is it really?
than most of the countries.
Right.
People just get to the point of despair and just decide to sell. They think their business is worth so much because their mate down the pub had a similar business and sold it for X. But you can't. It's not the same as selling a house.
No.
Businesses are run completely differently, even similar sized businesses. And although there is a valuation to a business, so there is so valuations are typically 3 years past profit. So it's EBITDA is like adjusted profit, so it's profit before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization. So it's like an average 3 years. And then there is a balance sheet, so there is a working capital. But the problem is, it's the commercials of the business that really put the value. So the multiple someone's willing to pay of those numbers will be dependent on how well you've set it up to run.
Right.
Typically, buyers don't want to buy a job. No. They want to buy an asset.
That's it.
So if you've got an owner-operated business where it's your lifestyle, it isn't technically worth as much, even if numerically it's there, because the person buying it has to then fill that role and want to return themselves.
That's right.
So if there is no money left after you pay your own dividends, then the business really isn't actually worth that much.
No.
Even though you might get a good lifestyle from it, will somebody else?
Yeah. That's wise words. There's a lot of people who'll be watching this at home will have a business, and they'll, but the way that you explained it is brilliant. So with the podcast side of things, you're always looking for people to interview, I take it? Yeah. So what kind of person would be, if someone's watching today and they wanted to get in touch with you to go on your podcast, what kind of people would interest you?
So we've had about 13 or 14 guests now, so I've only had it about 14 weeks. So we typically do interview some bigger entrepreneurs who have done multiple businesses. I think we've just interviewed someone that's built like 125 million in a year by doing 15 acquisitions.
Okay, cool.
So we do interview some bit, but I also like guests that have sort of gone from corporate to also an acquisition entrepreneur, maybe done their first acquisition.
Okay.
We look at people that have exited, because actually there's a lot of stories where people have exited through maybe IPO or to like private equity and actually lost everything. So we had a guest that talked a lot about their mental breakdown as part of an exit. So it's not always positive. But our setup of the podcast, we always look at a positive and a negative. So we always take the scenario and we look at what went well with it and what went negative, and we get really good feedback from that, because people like the fact that we actually talk about the real world. We don't only show the positive things.
That's really important. And if somebody wanted to set up a podcast, can you just explain how you did that? Because that's important as well, because people, I would like to do a podcast. How did she do it?
Well, I outsource my podcast. I outsource everything. No, well, I'll plug him here. There's a guy called Chris Hall. I'm connected with him on LinkedIn. He does my podcast with me, so he helped me set it all up. I basically just record. So I record the podcast and I give it to him, and then he creates. But it probably was about £7,000 to £8,000 investment to set it up. Yeah, it's an investment.
To do it properly.
To do it properly, yeah.
You get quite a few downloads, don't you?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we are statistically nearly in the top 25% of podcasts from our download numbers, based on what I've read, on what the statistics say they are. So yeah.
Well, just a quick plug for Chris, if you're watching. Julie just mentioned you. We are about to go to commercial break. Just before we go, Julie, to remind people, what's your email address if they want to get in contact with you?
It's julie.wilkinson@wilkinsonaccountingsolutions.co.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Julie Wilkinson, Profit Queen.
There we go. We'll see you after we shall see you guys. Thank you for watching this second section, and we'll see you after the next commercial break. Welcome back to NTV Unscripted. I'm Victoria Beale. I'm here with the wonderful Julie Wilkinson from Wilkinson Accounting Solutions. Now, just before we left for the commercial break, we were talking about Julie's podcasts and downloads. How many downloads are you getting now, roughly?
Well, we've had 1,300. So on averagely, we're getting about over 100 a episode at the minute.
And how many weeks have you been running the podcast?
About 14 weeks.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And would you say, as a business owner, that's a really good way of positioning yourself as one of the leaders and experts in your respective industry?
Well, it seems to have been for me, because I've got a group CFO that works internally, and everyone who speaks to, they're like, I saw Julie on the podcast.
Yeah.
Everyone seems to, well, the feedback I get, people seem to like the podcast, so.
Yeah, and I like the story, the fact that you talk about the good, the bad and the ugly of business. I mean, that's amazing. So let's talk about the future, okay? So you left the job at 37, you're nearly 40 in a couple of weeks' time. And we will talk about climbing Kilimanjaro as well towards the end of this segment. But you have actually built a company in a very super speedy time, which is testament to your expertise and all your knowledge that you have, which you're sharing with others, you're doing for yourself. So explain, first of all, going from a 3-year business, how you the sort of the growth side, because that's really, really impressive.
Yeah, so I had 2020 was just me. Mm-hmm. 21 was when we started to do the acquisition infrastructure that I was talking about, so we have our own services. I had one employee at that time, and we had a couple of outsourced bookkeepers, and then I actually saw real big traction in the acquisition market. We do about 3 to 5 a month now within either acquisitions or exit plan in a month on average. So I actually then recruited my biggest hire, which was my group CFO, Tilly. He should be watching.
Tilly, hello. And that's a Chief Financial Officer for anyone watching.
So Finance Director, other people might know them as.
Yeah.
And that was like that, so that was in 22, so he's just been here just about a year. Mm-hmm. But now we've got 9 employed, about 18, we've got 7 CFOs that work with us.
Oh, we've got your masterclass coming up there as well.
Yeah, I've just launched a masterclass, How to Understand Accounting Lingo.
Yeah, so yeah, you're on the sort of a crest of a wave there. Then we got the picture. So you appointed Tilly.
So we've done our own acquisition.
Yeah.
So we closed an acquisition this year. We bought some clients off a retiring accounting practice. So our aim is now we're going on our own investment journey. So, we help a lot with people with investments. So we do a lot of valuation decks, pitch decks, and cash flows for funding. Yeah. We've got our own. We want to do another 3 acquisitions. For me, my personal journey, obviously, I'm invested in Wilkinson's. I want it to grow, but it's not the only thing I do. So I do invest in property. I've got some angel investments in some tech companies. We do a bit of gold trading, and I do have a lot of connections and friends within acquisitions, which I do outside of Wilkinson's as well. I do professional speaking.
Yes.
Hence why I'm here today.
Yep.
I talk a lot about older learning, and how I became sort of like we talked about the accounting, in the accounting industry, how I became chartered without going to university, and at an older age. I know I wasn't old, but it was an older age than people going to university. Yeah. I talk a lot about acquisitions and exit planning, because we help a lot of people on build. Our ultimate aim is to help people make finance become a culture, because when we talk about, well, how do I transition my business from a lifestyle to an asset, the fact is you have to have a good governance and controls across the whole business, which is what a finance function does. Right. So we have a virtual finance team where we give people access to the relevant skill set within finance that they need. So I don't typically work in the business as that often. I do still work in it, but we are looking to recruit a CEO at some point and allow me to sort of step back and sort of be more of the face and do my other things as well.
There might be someone watching at home, so remind us of your email address again, Julie.
Yeah, it's julie.wilkinson@wilkinsonaccountingsolutions.co.uk.
Fantastic. So we'll just remind everyone of that, because there could be somebody watching who's suitable, you never know. Yeah. In terms of the future then, so what we've done the business, so we're just short of £500,000 turnover in 3 years. That's amazing. Congratulations, by the way. Multi-award winning as well. I think we do have some pictures of you winning awards and speaking as well, which our producer will share.
And we've
shortly.
been nominated for awards. We have a few awards that we didn't know. We don't know who nominated us. We've won some nominations, so yeah.
Fantastic. Client base, the typical clients you're working with are $1 million plus turnover businesses. That's your niche.
Yeah, we typically do about 1 to 20 mil.
Okay.
Work all over the world, so we work in 11 countries at the minute.
That's amazing.
And we work, like I say, we help people get their funding, so helping them with their cash flows and pitch decks.
Fantastic.
And I suppose my personal personal journey is just to keep growing it. Like I say, we're going on our own acquisition journey, and me personally, I'm trying to go, you know, I'm continuing with my professional speaking and my master classes, and obviously we've got some events launching, haven't we, Victoria?
We do. We have the Global Women's Conference.
At the Global Women's Conference.
The first of its kind in Milton Keynes on the 6th of October, I believe, at Hotel Latour. So yes, we will send details of that, and I'll talk about that next time. But Julie, we've got 2 minutes left of this show, okay? Is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would like to mention while you're here?
No, well, the fact that I'm climbing Kilimanjaro.
Yes.
So I'm climbing, I actually fly next Sunday.
Right.
So that's exciting.
Are you supporting any charity?
We're doing it for the world protection.
Okay, fantastic.
And world animal protection. So, cause obviously I love animals and dogs, so that's what we're doing it for. So I'm looking forward to doing that. It's going to be a feat.
Fantastic, I'll say. Yeah. And you're training for that as well?
Yeah, I've been training, yeah.
And what we're talking in miles, or, you know?
Well, it's 5,000 metres.
5,000 metres,
So it's 6.5 days up,
right.
1.5 days down. Which sounds strange, but it's because you're acclimatising, so obviously it's the altitude.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, look, just before we go, because we only have a couple of minutes left now, if someone's watching this, particularly a young woman, let's say, or a young man, but I think you're going to inspire lots of women today, what's the sort of top tips you could give somebody who's inspired by your story? I want to be like her, I want to be an entrepreneur. What would you say to them now?
I think start to meditate and not get dwelled into the day-to-day. So try and step outside of your comfort zones a little bit, because when if we always do the same thing, nothing ever changes. Have a plan, so plan it, what you want to do, and then give it a go, and stick to your plan. People move out of fear too often. Like, I see it quite a lot. They're doing one thing and then they don't get what they think they're going to get, so they'll just do something else because it might make them a bit of money at that time, but actually it's not really what they want to do, so it's not aligned to them personally, so they don't really enjoy it. And in the end, what most people end up doing, even when they run a business, is build themselves another job.
Right.
Which I think is why a lot of people get out of want to go into entrepreneurship, not to do that, but I think unfortunately a lot of them do.
Yeah. And
that's what we see a lot in the acquisitions, when so many people are still running their business and have been for 20 years.
Yes, exactly. Okay, well, we've got like 30 seconds left of this show, so just remind us of your email again.
julie.wilkinson@wilkinsonaccountings.co.uk.
And you're all over social media, Facebook,
Insta, TikTok, obviously the Build and Exit podcast.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, Facebook, so we're on all socials.
And what I will say, if any of you watching, Julie is always looking to speak to investors. She's always looking for staff members, anyone's interested in mergers and acquisitions, or even being as a guest on her podcast. Please do get in touch with her after watching today. Now we're going to wrap up, and it's been wonderful being back here on this wonderful set here at the NTV studio. And I shall see you again soon. Julie, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. See you soon, guys.